Setting yourself up as early as you possibly can, even as a student, is key to building wealth. So in today's video, I'm gonna be covering credit, saving money, how to get ahead, and investing. Hey, welcome back. I'm Iris. I talk about all things money and life tips, so follow to learn more. First up is credit cards. A credit score essentially functions as an adult credit card. It lets the bank know that, hey, this is a reliable person to loan money to. And having a good credit score will help you out when you try to qualify for loans, get an apartment, things like that. Having a good credit score will also help you get better access to better interest rates, and that will come in handy later down the road when you want to buy a property, qualify for loans, buy a car. Your credit score is based on a mix of things like your credit utilization, payment history, length of credit, and more. But the thing about credit is that it can be your best friend or your worst enemy, which is why it's super important that you be careful early on and build these really good disciplined habits. And once you get more advanced at using credit, you can start to enter the credit card point game, where you could get to learn how to essentially travel for free just by using credit card points, which is why I personally love credit. But in order to get to that point, credit has to be used responsibly. And some of the things that you have to be careful with credit is making sure that you pay your balances off on time and in full every single month. Never carry a credit card balance, because that is how you get hit with credit card interest, and it gets out of hand from there. Me personally, I look at credit card interest to be optional. It is 100% avoidable just by being responsible, just by paying that on time and in full every single month. Now, if you have absolutely zero credit, I recommend getting a student credit card. These are specifically designed for students that need to build credit. So I think the only requirement here is that you're enrolled into a college. And I'll leave right here some of my top recommendations for students. Now, I'm gonna share some very useful tips to help use credit responsibly. Always pay your bill off in full every single month. At the end of your billing cycle, you'll be issued something called a statement balance. You want to pay this balance off in full to avoid accruing interest. And my best tip for this is, if you're able to automate this, go ahead and automate it, because then you will never miss a payment and it'll always be paid off in full on time. Especially as you get older and you start to acquire more lines of credit, it's just easier to automate everything rather than having to keep track of all these different due dates. Next is to keep your utilization rate low. A utilization rate is essentially just how much credit you're using. So a rule of thumb that experts suggest is to keep your utilization rate under 30%. So calculate all of the credit that you have, calculate 30% of it, and try not to use any more than that. But when it comes to utilization rate, honestly, the lower the better. Having a low credit utilization rate just signifies to the banks that you're not overly reliant on credit. I mean, think about it. Lenders would obviously prefer borrowers that don't max out their credit cards. Low credit utilization is just an indicator of strong financial management. Pay your card off on time. Your credit card payment will have a due date. You want to make sure that you pay that off on time, because payment history accounts for about 35% of your credit score. That's a pretty big chunk and 100% in your control. This one is straightforward, just don't miss a payment. And this one's just a bit of a personal tip from me to you. If you can't buy it twice, don't put it on a credit card. And what that means is, in order for you to put something on a credit card, you want to make sure that you have twice the amount of cash for it. The biggest mistake that people make when it comes to credit is they start spending money that they don't have. So my rule of thumb is, if I don't already have twice the money for it up front, I'm not going to put it on a credit card, because it's not worth risking getting yourself into unnecessary debt. And here's an important tip to just getting ahead in finance and life in general, is just to avoid getting yourself into consumer debt and digging yourself into debt. Because what holds a lot of young people back from creating wealth is just debt. Next is saving money. Honestly, saving money, especially if you're a full-time student, can be a little tricky, because it's likely you're not working that many hours anyway. But one of the most important money milestones to achieve is an emergency fund. An emergency fund obviously saves your butt in cases of emergency, but it also keeps you out of debt and it leaves your investments untouched. Experts suggest keeping 3 to 6 months of expenses tucked away in a high-yield savings account. So everyone's number for this is going to look a little bit different. So you have to calculate all of your living expenses, so taking into account like your rent, how much you spend on average for groceries, car insurance, things like that, multiply that total number by 3 or 6, whatever you're comfortable with. And now once you get that goal number, where do we keep these savings? And the answer is a high yield savings account. A high yield savings account functions exactly like a regular savings account, but it allows you to earn passive income through interest income. Banks that offer high yield savings accounts are usually online banks. So since they save money not having that many physical locations, they're able to put the money back into your pocket. Currently, high yield savings accounts are offering anywhere from like 3 to 5% on your money, whereas traditional savings accounts usually only offer you 0.01%, so it's pretty significant. I mean, just for reference, this is how much money I made last month for doing absolutely zero work, just for having my money sitting in one of these accounts. And I've linked below some of my favorite high yield savings accounts in the description box down below. They are affiliate links, and I really appreciate the support that I get on this channel. And it's important to note when it comes to high yield savings accounts that this is not a replacement for investing. It's just a better place to park your cash. Now we're gonna do a little overall basic on investing. Investing is simply a way for your money to grow over time. Now, starting to invest is important for a multitude of reasons, but one of the reasons is inflation. Inflation is when the price of things go up over time. I mean, we're all victims of inflation here. I mean, look at the prices today. It's rough out here. So if your money is not keeping up with the pace of inflation and it's not growing, you are actually losing money. You're losing purchasing power. So if all you do is just stick your money into a savings account and never actually invest, you're actually just losing money. You're losing purchasing power. Your money is devaluing. And investing will help your money keep up with and even outpace inflation. Okay, so now that you know the importance of investing, what exactly do you invest in? So you invest into assets. An asset is just something that you own that holds financial value. So think real estate, stocks, ETFs, things like that. A stock is essentially just partial ownership of a company. If the company is doing well, you essentially get to get in on that as the value of the stock increases. So for example, say you buy some stock in Amazon, you are now a partial owner of Amazon, and as that company begins to grow and do well, so does your share. Me personally, most of my investments are in stocks because they're really accessible, they're really easy, and very easy to maintain. But don't worry, you don't have to go through all the mental work into picking individual stocks, because what you can just do is get an index fund. An index fund is very simple. It functions essentially like a multi-pack of socks. When you buy a multi-pack of socks, in one purchase, you are getting multiple pairs of socks. Well, an index fund functions very similar, where when you buy one index fund, you are getting exposure to thousands of stocks. So many different index funds to choose from, some that track international stocks, tech stocks, the whole US market, but don't worry, I'm not going to overwhelm you with all of that just yet. Now, for example, this right here is an index fund that tracks the S&P 500. The S&P 500 tracks the top 500 performing companies. So when you invest into this one index fund, you are getting exposure to the top 500 performing companies. And just for example, these are the top 10 holdings of this index fund, and you're probably familiar with most of them. Okay, now where do you actually go to start investing? There are tons of different accounts that give you access to get started investing, but I want to shed light on the Roth IRA. This one, especially if you start this young, is a very powerful one. This is an individual retirement account that is funded with post-tax dollars. So think money that you already paid taxes on. Now, the cool thing about this account is that all the gains inside of it are tax-free. So if you start this account early, the earlier you start, the longer time your money has to grow. And since you can see that all the gains inside of this are tax-free, you can see just how powerful this account is for building wealth. Anyone can open these accounts, and here are places where you can open one. I personally have mine with Fidelity, and I haven't had any issues with them. I think they're really easy to use, and I don't have any complaints. When I was a college student, I took my personal finances very seriously, and some didn't really understand me because at the time I was part-time. I was making like 13 bucks an hour. A lot of people were telling me what I was doing wasn't really going to make a difference, and I disagree. In fact, it's because I started that early that by the time I got older and started to make more money, I already had the knowledge and the discipline to carry out those habits to continue building wealth. How you handle small money is how you handle big money. So by the time I got older and started to make more money, I was responsible enough and had the knowledge to take care of it and use it to build wealth. I hope you found all of these tips helpful. These are things that I would have loved to know when I was a college student, and I'll see you in the next one.